Welcome to Horsepower. If you watched the last episode, you'll see I got my Celica up and running again. So she's all ready to go. So it's time for some upgrades. So what are we going to do? Well, I've had a few tarmac events lined up and I wanted to try out a bigger tyre. Previously I've used a 205, 215 wide, which I think the Celica is quite a heavy car and needs something bigger. So I've got some bigger tyres here. 17x9 rims, 255 wide tyres. Only problem is they don't fit. So we'll make them fit. You can see here they're sticking out a bit past the guards, and they are right up against the coilover as far as they go. It doesn't help the fact that I've got quite big coilovers because the big rally inverted strut ones, so that forces the tyre outwards a little bit. So with these, the only thing I could find was a 5x114 stud wheel. So I've got a spacer in here to convert it from 5100 to 5114, and also spaces it out the perfect amount from the coilover. So how are we going to make it fit? This is already a wide body ST185, so we're going to make it extra wide body. So the plan for the wide body is to build up the profile on the existing guard with bog and foam and whatever else, get it get it looking how we want it to look, and then take a fiberglass mold off the car and then make a fiberglass reproduction from that mold. Then back to the car we'll rip off all the bog and all the build up, and then cut back the original guard with an angle grinder or whatever, and then weld in a new inner guard liner. This is the first step to building up the mold, well, the plug for the over fender. So it's just some cut up fuel barrel, actually, some plastic, maybe PTFE or whatever it is, with some double-sided tape. It's just stuck up to the wheel well there, and then just some aluminium angle taped onto the side of the car, and this will just stop the bog drooping down, so it'll just give it something to sit on. Pretty simple. So what I'm going to do here is take this line out 90 degrees to the body, and then the mud flap will then follow this line down, and then this will be sort of open space here but with the mud flap, and sort of the over fender will be here and follow this line here. Made a bit of progress on the driver's side here. Well, I've long lost count of how many layers there are on here, but quite a few. It's looking pretty nasty at the moment, so it's going to need a fair bit of sanding, but you get the general idea. It's going to need a fair bit more in here, and so the idea is that the over fender will start on top of this factory line here and then come out, not heaps but sort of a wee bit more than this, and so yeah, it just needs a bit more fettling, more layers of bog. So it's not much to look at the moment, but what I'm trying to do is follow the factory lines and just extend the body in a natural way, so it's not going to be totally obvious when you first see the car that it's modified, but it's just going to look extra aggressive. So that's, I don't know, 3 or 4 layers of bog there, and there's still a lot of shaping to go, so you can sort of see the progress. It's about the only time I choose to wear a mask. Making a bit of a mess here, sanding this guard. So there's obviously a fair bit to go, a fair bit more to fill in, a wee bit here and a wee bit around here, but the general shape and the contours are coming sort of coming obvious now. Come around the other side here, this is starting to take more shape. Needs a fair bit more material on there to get close to the other side. It's pretty easy to make one side look good, but the hardest part of this exercise is getting them perfectly mirrored, and I don't think I'll be able to get them perfectly mirrored, but hopefully I'll be able to get them sort of reasonably close. You never see both left and right sides together, so they only need to be so perfect. I don't think this is going to be something that I'm going to sell. This is probably just going to be something for me, as well as the guards in between layers of bog drying. I've also started to work on this rear wing, so in order to do that I've taken off the diffuser, taken off the bumper, and so what the plan here is, so usually there's a crash bar that goes here behind the bumper, and it's secured with these that go in there and bolt on. So some years ago I chopped off the crash bar to save some weight, and what I did with this one is weld on this tow hook, just so if I get stuck in a ditch or whatever I can get towed out. This one also had the same tow hook, and then we tried towing the car with it and it ripped the tow hook off. Anyway, what I'm going to do with this one is chop this tow hook off. These will go in the gap here, and I'll weld on, so I'll chop off the nastiness and weld on a nice plate, so it's nice and strong, and then get a piece of 38mm roll cage tubing which will tie this plate to that plate, and there'll be a bar that'll come here. This will serve 2 purposes. Firstly, it'll be a crash bar of sorts, so if I stack the back of the car into a cliff or a tree or something, it'll save the chassis, but the main purpose is to mount the wing off. It's actually harder than you think to mount a wing properly. If you mount it to like the boot or the chassis, it's all just really thin sheet steel, and there's actually quite a lot of load that goes through the wing, so it's actually more of a challenge to mount it than one would think. But when it's mounted in here, it should be pretty strong. It sort of ties into the chassis rails, and then it's going to have, so the bumper will come out to about here, and it'll have some slits through the bumper, which the aluminium wings will stay. The aluminium wings will go through. So when we fiberglass onto pure bog, the bog is porous, so the resin will leach into the bog, and then there's no way you're going to get the mold off because it'll just stick to it. So what we need to do is paint it, and that seals it up, and then it's going to get release agent and PVA on it, but we'll learn more about that as we go. So what I'm doing right now is waiting for this to get nice and hard. Ideally would leave this a week for it to get really hard, and then we can give it a really good polish back to a mirror smooth finish. I don't have time to give it a week, so it's going to get a day or maybe 2. We'll see how we get on. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the shape and all of that. The only sort of major sort of fuck up is this little spot here, but we'll make do. Come around to the other side, and it's looking pretty similar. They're not perfectly mirrored at the moment, mostly due to time constraints, but fortunately you can only see one side at a time, and just for a first one-off it'll do. Also disclaimer, I am not a bodywork guy or a fiberglass guy, so if there's any pros out there, please bear with me. So I haven't been filming much. I've been in a bit of a rush. I've got my first event this weekend, this Saturday, and today Tuesday, and there's a lot of work to do. So this is where we're at the moment. This is the left hand guard. So this is all bog and one layer of 2-pack primer. So it's not perfect, but what I can do is obviously we'll make a mold and then reproductions, and then we can either fiddle the reproductions or the mold to get it perfect later on. But what needs to happen is these need to come off so I can go do this event this weekend, but before they come off they obviously need the mold taken off. And when we fiberglass it, if we fiberglass onto pure bog, the bog is, here's where we're at the moment. So this is one side of the wide body mold. It's looking a bit funny now with all these little things here. These are just strengthening ribs. They look a bit funny, but they should do the job. And then we've got these big ribs here at the end, and they serve two purposes. One, to keep it nice and stiff, but also when we're laying the part in the mold will sit on this flat edge here and won't all wobble around and be annoying. So what I did is I laid the mold, laid the mold, and then pulled it off, make sure it would come off easily, which fortunately it did, and then put the mold back on, held it on there with some tape, and then put the stiffening ribs in there. And come across and we can see its mate from the other side here. So it sits nicely on those ribs. So it actually popped off really easy, which I was quite worried about. There are a few imperfections here, so a bit of surface sort of pitting there, and a few little bits and pieces that need to be sanded back and probably bogged and finished, but that's all quite simple really. The overall shape is pretty good, so that'll just take a wee bit of time to sort of sand back and tidy this up and polish it. But yeah, overall pretty happy with it.